In this project, I will be testing the leavening properties of two chemical leaveners, baking soda and baking powder, in a red velvet cake recipe. I chose to bake a cake because I really like to bake and I really like to eat, especially cakes. And I chose this specific ingredient swap because I've always been interested in testing whether one leavener might be more effective at making a cake rise than the other. And it's also useful to know in case one day you might not have baking powder at home and you need something to replace it with. So the original recipe only calls for baking powder. So the main research question that I'm asking is if baking soda can be used as an adequate substitute for baking powder, and if it can produce a cake of similar quality. So for a little bit of background, leavening is when a base and an acid react to produce carbon dioxide, and those bubbles form and expand to help baked goods rise. So baking powder contains a base, an acid, and a dried starch that acts as a filler, so it just needs to interact with the liquid in order to break down and produce the CO2 bubbles. Baking soda, on the other hand, contains only a base, which is sodium bicarbonate, so you have to combine it with an acid to help it break down. So knowing this, I decided to add vinegar to my substitution recipe as well, because baking soda needs an acid. I expect the two cakes to be similar in volume. I do predict, however, that the baking soda cake will taste a bit more acidic or sour, just due to the added vinegar. So I used flour, sugar, vanilla extract, oil, red food coloring, eggs, buttermilk, salt, cocoa powder, and coffee. And for the methods, I first combined the dry ingredients, and then I combined the oil and the sugar, and then the rest of the wet ingredients, and gave everything a good mix. Added the dry ingredients to the wet, and then once it was fully mixed, I put it into a greased and floured cake pan. For the baking soda cake, each step was exactly the same as previously described, except baking soda was obviously used instead of baking powder, and I also added a little bit of vinegar into the wet ingredients. And so here you can see the final results. On the left is the cake with baking soda and vinegar, and on the right is the original recipe with baking powder. I then conducted a blind taste test with 4 people. I asked them all to choose the cake that they liked the best and also describe texture, smell, and appearance of both cakes, and they were also given water in between each cake to cleanse their palates. So here are some clips.
This is a small bite, but this one smells like coffee. And it tastes like coffee. And it's denser. Less bouncy and springy and fluffy and spongy. And foamy, but it's good. I picked number B.
You like B better?
Yeah.
I prefer B.
And you, Dad?
I like A better.
Great. Which one was your favorite?
A.
A was your favorite. Thank you. So here's a quick screen cap of the results. As we could see, preference was split 50-50, so half the people preferred cake A, half the people preferred cake B, which was the baking powder cake, and the most common observations here were that the baking soda cake had a fluffier, airy texture. Meanwhile, the baking powder cake had more concentrated coffee and chocolate flavors and aromas. I also measured the cakes right after they came out of the oven and found that the baking soda cake measured twice the height of the original baking powder cake. So in this recipe, baking soda actually made the cake rise more, and perhaps this could have been due to other acidic ingredients in the recipe, like buttermilk and coffee, that created a more acidic environment for the baking soda to react with. However, I found that the baking soda cake did not smell or taste as desirable, and I wonder if this is due to the vinegar having a strong sour taste that could have overpowered the other ingredients. So to conclude, I would say if you care more about texture, use baking soda, but if you care more about flavor and aroma, use baking powder. Some of the limitations in this experiment included baking only one of each cake, so you can't have a ton of confidence that the results are not due to chance. Also, cakes are dome-shaped, which means the height changes throughout the cake, so my measurements might not be completely accurate for that. I think it would be really interesting to repeat this experiment more times to increase the sample size, and also have more people do the taste test to get a better representation of the population. It'd be also really cool to introduce a third cake type, which would use baking powder and baking soda to see if combining them produces new desirable effects. Future experiments could also use different leavening methods, such as whipped egg whites or whipped cream, to see if an optimal leavening result could be achieved with those too. Thank you for watching!